Why do muscles feel tight? In this video, I'm going to give you 6 reasons why they're doing that. My name is Dr. Story. I've been a chiropractor for over 24 years. I'm going to give you some realistic advice based on my experience. Now, the 3 most common places where people feel muscle tightness is right here in their neck and shoulder. That's number 1. Number 2 is in their lower back. And number 3, their hamstrings. Number 1, compensation because of joint instability. What this means is you have to imagine that in, for example, our neck, if you have had an injury that has injured the ligaments of your spine, then what happens is the bones will actually shift in an abnormal way. This instability of the joints because of ligament damage is the ultimate cause of why muscles will feel tight around the area. What happens is because of that shearing, there are nerves that sense that there's a problem in the body. Those nerves are afferent nerves that go up to the brain. The brain then interprets that there's danger in that area of the joint, and then the brain will send efferent nerves down to the muscles, and the muscle tightness is there as a protective mechanism. So if you are always feeling tight in a particular area, the first reason why that can occur is because you have a bad joint mechanical shear that's an instability, and your brain is actually tightening the muscles as a protective mechanism. Now, how do you fix this? How do you deal with it? Most people are trying to do exercises where they're using their joints far too aggressive. What you want to do is short arc strengthening exercises. So I'm going to put a link down below for an exercise, for example, of the neck. What I have patients do when they have neck instability is I will have them do isometric. So I will put their hands behind their head and they will push aggressively in one area, but they will not do full range of motion. That full range of motion would thus cause the bones to shear and further cause muscular tightness. Whereas if you do a short range of motion where the bones will not shear, that strengthens the muscles, reduces the tightness, and reduces that protective mechanism and reduces the pain. Number 2 is a subluxation. A subluxation is an area of the spine or any joint in the body for that matter, where the joint actually loses its range of motion. This is the exact opposite of what I talked about in the first one. So what ends up happening is when the joint doesn't want to move well, what ends up happening is there's an inflammatory response with that usually. With that inflammatory response, because it's in the spine, it causes a neurological dysfunction, and thus the body then again, same exact reason as before, tries to protect that area, and the muscles will feel tight around that area. Now, how do you fix it? You have to fix the proper joint motion. So this is where a chiropractor fits in very nicely, because a chiropractor, in theory, should be able to find those areas where the joints are not moving well and coax those joints to move well by adjusting the joint so that it'll start to move better. Good joint motion, there's no reason the muscles around that area should feel tight. Now, the third reason why your muscles feel tight is actually because of the muscles themselves. If you have had an acute injury, such as a whiplash or a significant fall or a sports injury, or you have chronic repetitive strain on the muscle and you don't allow recovery, then the muscle can become very fibrotic. Fibrosis is a situation where the proteins in the muscle try to recover by tightening it up. And this is a real problem that I see in my practice that is very often overlooked. So when you develop this fibrosis or an adhesion inside the muscle, then the muscle cannot contract well and cannot stretch. So therefore the muscle always feels tight. Now, the mistake that most people make is because they feel tightness in that muscle, they're always trying to stretch it. Well, you're trying to stretch an area that's glued together and won't stretch. So what ends up happening is you end up stretching the normal areas of the muscle, possibly creating further tears and further fibrosis. So this is a situation where you keep stretching, but you keep getting tighter. So what is the solution to this? This is a situation where either active release or active myofascial release or a Graston tool or a gusha would work wonders, because if you can break up and soften the scar tissue or get that fibrosis to become more pliable, then you've essentially reduced the tightness that you feel. Number 4, postural stress. Postural stress is a big one, and we see that even more today than when I first started in practice, because when I first started in practice, sure, people were using computers, but now they're using computers and the phone. Combine that with less exercise, you've got a recipe for disaster. So there are 2 types of postural distortions that are very common that cause neck pain, back pain, and hamstring tightness, and it's called upper cross syndrome and lower cross syndrome. A good example of upper cross syndrome would be where a person's head is just way forward like that. They have that forward head posture. Well, the problem with that is your head weighs as much as a bowling ball. Now, if you were to hold a bowling ball up like this, and my arm would represent the spine, and you can hold a bowling ball like this, you can hold this for, well, forever. But the farther the bowling ball goes out and forward, the more your muscles have to try to chronically hold you up. So the more forward your head is, the more your neck muscles are under constant strain holding you up. So the reason they feel tight is because they're always contracting. They're never shut off. The same thing with the lower back. If you have kind of that Donald Duck posture, what ends up happening is the muscles of your back are constantly, 24 hours a day, trying their best to hold you up because of your bad posture. Now, what's the solution to this? Fix your posture. So I give people postural exercises that actually hold them up. If you go to my playlist section of my channel, I have all the postural exercises. They're under the section that says core exercises. Watch them, follow them, and do them. Number 5, weak muscles. Now, it seems a little counterintuitive to say weak muscles would become tight, but the reason weak muscles cause muscle tightness is simply because of what's called reciprocal inhibition, or Sherrington's law. You can Google that, look it up. So what happens is if one muscle is weak, another muscle is going to compensate for that weakness. So many people have weak postural muscles, they have weak muscles, and other muscles will try to compensate, and that is the reason why a person feels that their muscles are always tight. Stretching those muscles never works. In my years of practice, I've never seen anyone that has stretched that tight muscle and had any long-lasting improvement. The key is to muscle test them and find those weak muscles, and this is of course the solution to this problem, is find the weak muscles and strengthen those. When you strengthen those, what ends up happening is those tight muscles seemingly go away. An excellent example of this is how I show patients, if you had a water bottle and this is a muscle and this is a muscle, and you're holding on to the spine, or any joint for that matter, and so what ends up happening is you have the antagonistic muscle and the agonistic muscle, and so both are equal strong on both sides. Well, if I weaken this muscle and I don't use this muscle very well, then all of a sudden this muscle on this side of the bone has to actually tighten up to hold the joint together. So you can stretch this muscle because it feels tight. It doesn't work. What do you need to do? Get that other muscle to function well and hold the joint from equal side, and suddenly when this muscle is holding on to the spine properly, this muscle doesn't need to be as tight. Now, the 6th and final reason why muscles actually feel tight is because they are actually short. This is extremely common in our hamstrings. If you have a desk job or you're not very active, you're probably sitting for long periods of time. So when your knee is bent and you're just sitting there, the muscles are actually becoming shorter, or they're feeling shorter is what they're doing. The actual muscle doesn't have enough pliability to stretch. So if you were to just sit all day for, let's say, 10 hours a day and you're gaming or you're at work doing work, but you never actually take that muscle through a full range of motion, then over time, your muscles are going to feel tight. Now, what is the solution to this? This is a situation where stretching actually works quite well. Now, it doesn't even matter how you stretch. You could do just the standard static stretching, which gets a lot of flack on the internet because athletically, static stretching is not the most effective way to stretch. But most of the complaints against static stretching are with athletes, because it's true, static stretching doesn't have a tremendous amount of benefits compared to other types of stretching. But there's PNF stretching, there's active isolated stretching, there's post-isometric relaxation, there's post-isometric contractions, there's PAILs, there's rails, there's all different types of stretching. But this situation where a person is just not moving the muscle at all, any type of stretching is good stretching. Imagine for a moment that you had a cast on your arm. You broke your arm and they put a cast and you just don't move your elbow for about 6 weeks. What would happen to your biceps and triceps? They would get short. So in that situation, after you get the cast off, you would need to move your elbow and use your muscles in a full range of motion. That's how you get the flexibility back. Well, with hamstrings in particular, most people are at work. They never stop going to work. They work for 40, 50 years in the same position. They've never used those muscles in any lengthened way. So the best solution for this one is to actually do any type of stretching. So I hope this has been informative to you. When I get a patient that walks through my doors, this is actually what goes through my mind. When they have a tight muscle somewhere, in my mind, very quickly, I go through these 6 steps and I analyze them to find out exactly why are they having tight muscles. Because if you try stretching for an adhesion or you try stretching for a joint instability, you're always going to be frustrated and it's never going to work. So if you thought this video was interesting, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I do have a Patreon account. Share this with people on social media because I guarantee you there's a tremendous amount of people that are stretching wondering why their muscles stay tight. And if you let them know this, it'll give them information that they could possibly use that will stop their muscles from being so tight.